Montana Territory, June 1882. The sky cracked open with thunder, just as Helena Rosewood's knees hit the dry earth beside the whitewashed church. Her black skirts fanned around her, soaked from the sudden storm, hands trembling as she clutched the wooden cross marking her husband's grave. Drops of rain slid down her cheeks, but they could not hide the tears that had not stopped in 5 days. "I buried you right here, and I still feel like you just left," she whispered, voice hoarse. "How am I supposed to raise Rachel without you?" She leaned forward, forehead touching the damp wood. Behind her, the trees swayed. The ground was uneven and her legs gave out completely. Her body folded, shoulder pressing into the mud as her breath caught in her throat. Footsteps crunched behind her. Slow, heavy, purposeful. A voice broke through the wind. "Ma'am, you all right?" She didn't lift her head. Couldn't. A moment later, strong arms wrapped around her, careful but firm. She was lifted gently like someone picking up something fragile they were afraid to break. Her heart pounded as she tried to push herself upright, but her limbs refused. "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice shook all over. "Please just leave me." "No," the man said simply. She looked up for the first time. He was tall, soaked through, the rain darkening his brown hat and coat. His jaw was rough with stubble, his eyes a slate gray that looked worn from years of sorrow. He didn't look like someone just passing by. He looked like someone who knew what it meant to kneel beside a grave and wish the world would stop turning. "I'm Helena," she said, breathless. He nodded once. "Malcolm Kersey." His voice was low, steady. There was no pity in his eyes, only something quiet. Something that made her feel like the ground beneath her might stop spinning if she just looked at him long enough. He helped her sit up on the church's stone steps, rain still falling around them. She didn't say much. Neither did he. They just sat, the storm washing away the dust and the silence, the kind that only grief could build. After a while, he stood. "You got someone waiting for you?" She hesitated, then looked away. "My daughter, Rachel. She's 9. I left her with the pastor's wife." He held out a hand. "Let's get you back to her." Helena stared at his hand. Then she took it. Rachel ran to her the moment Helena stepped inside the pastor's cabin, throwing her arms around her waist. Helena held her close, burying her face into her daughter's hair. "I'm okay," she whispered. "I promise." Malcolm stood in the doorway, hat in his hands. He didn't say anything, but his eyes never left Helena's face. He turned to go, but she called out, "Wait." He paused. "Thank you. For today." He gave a small nod. "You ever need help, I'm at the south end of town, boarding above the stable." Then he left. The next morning, Helena knocked on the stable door. Malcolm opened it, surprised. He looked tired, like he had not slept much, but he stepped aside without asking why she had come. "I need work," Helena said. "I can sew, cook, clean. I just need to earn enough to stay here. For Rachel." He studied her for a long moment. "You ever worked with horses?" "No, but I can learn." Malcolm rubbed the back of his neck. "You can help me with tack repairs. I got more than I can handle." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Thank you." He looked at her like he wanted to say something else, but just nodded. They worked quietly that morning. Helena sat with leather straps and tools while Malcolm brushed down a chestnut mare. Every once in a while, she glanced at him, noticed how careful he was with the animals, how he spoke little but worked hard. When the sun reached high, he handed her a tin plate with bread and dried apples. "You got someone buried at that church too?" she asked. Her voice was soft, careful. He looked out toward the hills. "My younger brother. Died in Dodge. Shot over a card game. I brought him back here myself." Helena didn't speak, just nodded. They ate in silence, and it was not uncomfortable. Days passed. She came every morning. Rachel sat outside with a book or helped sweep, and Helena worked side by side with Malcolm. He taught her to oil leather, to check for weak stitching. She watched the way he moved, with grief still clinging to him, but something gentle under it. One afternoon, she laughed at something he said, something dry and unexpected, and he looked at her like he had not seen a woman laugh in years. That night, when she tucked Rachel into bed, the little girl whispered, "I like Mr. Kersey. He makes you smile." Helena kissed her forehead. "He's kind. He's sad too." "Yes," Helena said. "Like us." 1 week later, Helena found Malcolm sitting alone behind the stable. His hat was beside him, and he was holding a letter in one hand crumpled. "Bad news?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just memories." She sat beside him. "Do you want to talk about it?" He looked at her. "Do you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached over and took his hand. He let her. They sat there as the sun dipped low. His fingers stayed wrapped around hers, and something in her chest ached, but it was no longer just grief. It was the ache of feeling again. 2 days later, Rachel got sick. Helena sat by her bedside all night, cool rag on her forehead. The fever broke by morning, and Helena cried into her hands with relief. There was a knock at the door, and when she opened it, Malcolm stood there holding a basket of food and a bottle of tonic. "She okay?" he asked. "She will be," Helena said, wiping her face. He looked at her for a long moment. "You do not have to do any of this alone." She stepped forward before she could stop herself. "Neither do you." He hesitated. Then he reached up and touched her cheek. "You make the days feel lighter." "So do you," she whispered. His thumb brushed her skin, slow. She leaned in. He caught her lips with his. It was soft, hesitant, but it was real. And when they pulled back, neither of them looked away. Not anymore. The first snow flurried down 2 nights before the harvest dance. Helena stood at the edge of the dry root cellar behind the pastor's cabin, her shawl drawn tight around her shoulders. The wind carried the scent of wood smoke and damp leaves. She watched Rachel help Mrs. Dorsey peel apples by the fire, her braids slipping free as she leaned over the basin. That child had learned too much too early, but she still found ways to laugh quiet, bird-like sounds that made Helena's heart pull in strange directions. She had not planned to go to the dance. But Rachel had asked her in that determined way she had, standing with her arms crossed and chin lifted. "You haven't danced since before Papa got sick. You like dancing?" Helena hadn't answered, but Rachel had taken that for the yes it was. The next evening, Helena waited beside the schoolhouse, boots dusted, hair pinned back, her dress brushed clean of the stable's grit. The hem was worn, but her hands had stitched rosemary into the pocket for courage. Malcolm arrived on horseback, leading a bay mare behind him. "She's sure-footed," he said, offering the reins. "And steady." Helena took them and met his eyes. He wore his Sunday coat, collar a little stiff, hands freshly scrubbed but still rough. There was a line of tension at the corner of his mouth, like he wasn't sure what to say and didn't want to say the wrong thing. They rode side by side, hooves crunching frost-laced dirt. Lanterns bobbed ahead where the townsfolk gathered, music already drifting through the air, fiddle, banjo, boots tapping porchwood. Rachel waved from the steps, cheeks pink, a molasses cookie in her hand. Helena caught her daughter's eye and smiled once, small and sure. Inside, light spilled across the room. Malcolm took her coat without speaking, hung it on a peg beside his own. His hand brushed hers when she passed it over, and her breath caught, not from surprise but the warmth of it. They stood near the wall for a while, watching others pair off. Helena's fingers curled around each other at her waist. "You ever learn the Virginia reel?" Malcolm asked. "When I was 16, she said. "I haven't danced it since." He extended his hand. "Then let's see if it comes back." They stepped into the line, boots moving with the call. Helena's body remembered more than she expected. Her laughter came unbidden when Malcolm turned the wrong way, nearly bumping into the blacksmith's wife. He grinned, eyes crinkling, and tried again. By the 3rd pass, they matched steps without thinking. Afterward, they stepped outside. The night was cold, the stars sharp-edged above the snow-dusted prairie. Helena leaned against the rail, breath clouding. "I used to think," she said slowly, "that love only came once." Malcolm didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "I thought the same." She looked at him. "Don't you feel like we've lived 2 lifetimes already?" He nodded. "And yet here we are." She turned toward him. "I don't know what comes next, but I'd like to find out with you." He stepped closer. "Then you will." Their hands found each other again. Not tentative this time, but certain. His thumb passed once along the edge of her wrist, and she leaned into him, her head resting just beneath his collarbone. They stayed like that until the music faded behind them, until the night no longer felt so cold. The frost deepened as November settled in, quiet and clear. Helena stepped out just after sunrise, arms filled with splitwood gathered from behind the pastor's shed. Her palms were raw from the axe handle, but it was a good kind of sore, the kind that came from building something that held weight. Inside, Rachel was bent over the slate board Malcolm had left for her 2 weeks earlier, tongue peeking out as she penciled out her sums. Helena watched her a moment before setting the wood beside the hearth. She'd grown steadier, her shoulders less hunched. Helena kissed the crown of her head, then pulled on her shawl again. "I'll only be at the stable a short while. Mrs. Dorsey's coming by when she's done with the preserves." Rachel didn't look up. "Tell Malcolm I finished the tally board he made. The one for the feed bins." Helena smiled faintly. "He'll be glad to hear it." The morning air bit through her sleeves as she crossed town. A wagon trundled past, the baker's boy waving from the bench. Helena nodded back, boots crunching brittle leaves. At the stable, she found Malcolm bent over a broken wagon trace, the leather split clean at the buckle. He was humming low under his breath, something tuneless and slow, and didn't notice her until she stepped into the light at the door. "You're early," he said, straightening, wiping his hands on a rag. His hair was damp at the temples, like he'd already been at work for hours. "I wanted to bring you something." She reached into her shawl and held out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "It's dried plum bread. Might not be pretty, but it'll hold together better than jerky." His brows lifted as he took it. "You made this?" "With Rachel's help. She insisted we grind the stone-milled flour ourselves." He unwrapped it carefully, then tore a small piece and took a bite. "It's better than anything I've had since leaving Missouri." "High praise," she said, leaning against the stall rail. "You never told me you came from Missouri." He looked at her, chewing slowly. "Boone County. I left when I was 20. Nothing left for me there after the land was sold off." "And your brother?" "Followed me west 2 years later. Thought he'd find something better." We didn't talk much near the end. Helena didn't press. The silence settled in, but it wasn't hollow. She watched him tuck the rest of the bread away into his coat pocket. "I've been thinking," he said after a long pause, "about building something more permanent. The stable's only meant for boarding, but a proper livery one with room for a smithy and a loft for hay storage that could serve the town better." She met his eyes. "You're thinking of staying?" His gaze didn't waver. "I'm thinking I already have." Her throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "That's a big step. I don't expect to take it alone." She let that sit between them. A beam of light caught the dust in the barn, and it swirled between them like something alive. Helena moved closer, slowly, until her hand rested beside his on the rail. "Rachel's been asking if she can help you build the tack shelves. She wants to learn the difference between hame straps and belly bands. She's got the makings of a fine harness maker," he said. "Or a clever merchant." "She needs steadiness," Helena said quietly. "And I do too." He reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing hers. "I've got plenty of that to give." She let her fingers curl around his. "Then maybe we can start with the loft. You'll need a good ladder. And I've still got nails left from fixing the pantry shelf." He smiled, not bright, but warm and certain. "Then we'd best get to work before the snow sets in for good." That afternoon, they cleared the loft together, sweeping away the brittle straw and dragging up fresh timber from the pile behind the stables. Helena worked beside him without pause, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, her braid tucked behind her collar. When she dropped a hammer and muttered under her breath, Malcolm only chuckled softly and passed it back without comment. By dusk, the loft smelled of cut wood and fresh beginnings. As they stood in the doorway, wind curling through the open slats, Helena looked out toward the line of distant trees. "Do you think it's possible," she said, "to build something strong from what was broken?" He didn't answer right away. Then he stepped behind her, his arms settling gently around her waist, palms broad and steady. "I think we already are." She leaned back into him, eyes closed against the wind. For the first time in many seasons, the chill didn't bite as deep. The first real snow came in the night, a quiet curtain that softened the town and hushed the wind. By morning, the rooftops wore white caps and the fence posts wore collars of frost. Helena walked carefully along the path from the parsonage to the stable, her coat buttoned tight and her gloved hand holding Rachel's as they made their way through the narrowed trail Malcolm had shoveled before dawn. When they reached the barn, Rachel darted toward the back to check the litter of kittens born in the hay weeks before. Helena stepped inside slower, shaking the snow from her hem. Malcolm was at the forge, coaxing the fire to life with a steady rhythm that echoed through the stillness. "You've got Rachel worried that one of the gray ones isn't eating enough," Helena said, her voice carrying the sleep of early morning. "She tell you that? Or did she sneak out here yesterday while you weren't looking?" Helena raised an eyebrow. "She's subtle as a thunderclap." Malcolm set down the poker and wiped his brow with the back of his sleeve. "I'll keep an eye on it. They're strong. That little one just came late." Helena stepped closer, the warmth of the forge brushing her face. "You always know what to say to her." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the crate near the anvil and pulled out a square of folded canvas. "I meant to give you this yesterday. I mended the straps on your pack. The stitching on the left side was pulling loose." "I didn't even notice," she said, taking it from him. "I did." She looked up at that. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes held something steady. Not the weight of grief, though she knew it still lived behind them, but something that had grown in its place. Loyalty, maybe? Or the beginning of something deeper. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked, brushing her thumb along the edge of the canvas. "Used to," he said. "When I first got here, I figured I'd move on before the snow. Didn't see much reason to stay. And now?" He glanced toward the rafters where the new beams they'd raised 2 weeks ago still smelled of pine. "Now I've got a roof that doesn't leak, horses that know my voice, and a girl who talks to me like I'm worth listening to." Helena folded the canvas under her arm. "You left Missouri because there was nothing holding you. What's holding you now?" He met her eyes. "You." The words settled in the space between them like a stone in a stream, quiet, but unmoving. She didn't look away. "Then maybe we should stop waiting for signs and just build something that lasts." Malcolm reached for her hand. "You sure?" She nodded once. "I've been sure since the day you didn't ask me to stand. You just helped me do it." A door creaked open behind them and Rachel called from the back stall, "Mama, the gray one's nursing now." Helena turned toward the sound and Malcolm's hand slipped from hers, but not far. He followed her with his gaze, something unspoken resting easy on his face. That afternoon, Helena and Rachel helped move the last of the hay bales into the loft. Rachel worked without complaint, her cheeks red with cold, her hands tucked into a pair of mittens Helena had stitched from scraps. When the last bale thudded into place, Malcolm pulled a folded sheet of paper from the pocket of his coat. "Had the clerk draw this up," he said, offering it to Helena. "It's not much. Just a record that says the stable's officially mine now, and that it's got 2 partners if you want your name on it." She took the paper, fingers tracing the ink. "You're asking me to run it with you?" "I'm asking you to build it with me." She looked at him, then at Rachel, who was crouched beside the kittens, whispering something only they could hear. "Yes," she said. "We'll build the whole thing." That night, they lit a lamp in the loft window. A soft glow against the snow, it burned steady through the dark, a quiet promise to anyone looking on. Inside, Helena sat beside Malcolm on the low bench beneath the rafters. Rachel lay curled in a blanket nearby, fast asleep, her breath even. Helena rested her head against Malcolm's shoulder. "I never thought I'd feel safe again." "You are," he said. "And you're not alone." She believed him. Outside, the snow fell soundless and slow, covering the broken things beneath it, leaving only the shape of what they were building together. By late December, the livery stood finished, loft-boarded, hitch posts repaired, and the new forge roof patched and tarred before the worst of the cold set in. Helena stood in the doorway one morning, arms folded against her chest, watching her breath curl up into the pale light. The barn was quiet save for the swish of a tail and the rustle of hay. Rachel was inside the parsonage with Mrs. Dorsey, helping knead bread for the Christmas meal. Malcolm had gone to fetch a shipment of grain from the rail depot, and Helena had taken the piece of the morning to tend to the ledgers. Her fingers were ink-stained now, the columns of figures tidy and exact. When the door creaked open behind her, she looked up. "You're back early," she said. Malcolm stepped in, brushing snow from his coat. "Train came ahead of time. Caught me off guard. That doesn't happen often." He set the grain sack down and pulled off his gloves. "Miller from the next town over rode in while I was there. Looking for someone to shoe a pair of mules come spring. You take the job? Only if we've still got the hands." She gave him a sidelong glance. "We do." Malcolm walked past her slowly, close enough that the edge of his sleeve brushed hers. He didn't speak again until he'd struck a match and lit the lantern near the tack wall. The flame flared, then settled. "I asked the pastor this morning," he said, without turning, "if he'd marry us come New Year's." Helena didn't answer at first. The words settled around her like snowfall, soft, but filling every space. "You're sure that's what you want?" she asked. He turned then. "I've been sure since you handed me a broken halter and said you could learn." Her breath caught, not in surprise, but in the way truth sometimes lands after it's waited its turn. She stepped to him, laid her palm against his chest. "Then yes." His arms went around her, and for the first time since they met, he didn't hold back. She felt the full weight of him, warm, solid, steady against the cold of the world. She rested her head beneath his chin, and neither of them moved for a long while. That night, Rachel fell asleep with her arms wrapped around a new quilt Helena had sewn in secret scraps from her old dress, the blue one she hadn't worn since the summer before her husband died. Helena sat beside the bed until her daughter's breathing deepened, then closed the door and walked through the darkened parsonage toward the main room where Malcolm waited. He stood near the hearth, a tin cup of coffee in his hand, gaze on the fire. She crossed to him and took the cup, setting it aside. "You've made this house warmer," she said quietly. "Not with wood. With your being in it." His brow furrowed, not from confusion, but the effort of holding emotion steady. "I didn't know if I could be part of something again. But every day with you and Rachel, you've made this feel like a life I didn't think I'd get to live." She reached for his hand and laced her fingers through his. "Then let's keep living it." The wedding was simple. The pastor read from a worn linen-bound Bible, and Mrs. Dorsey pressed a sprig of pine into Helena's hand as she stepped forward, her dress brushed clean, her hair pinned with care, Rachel's small hands helping that morning. Malcolm wore the same coat he'd worn to the harvest dance, collar newly stitched. Rachel stood between them, holding both their hands when the vows were said. Afterward, they walked back to the livery together, boots crunching over the frozen earth, the sky wide and pale overhead. Inside, the stalls were swept clean, and a single lamp burned in the loft window. That night, after Rachel had curled into her bed and the fire had gone low, Helena stood at the edge of the room and watched Malcolm hang his coat beside hers. "You think this'll last?" he asked, his voice low. She crossed the floor, barefoot on the worn wood, and slipped her arms around his waist. "It already has," she said. He held her close, and she tipped her face up to his. "I love you, Helena," he said, voice rough with quiet. She smiled, eyes steady on his. "And I love you, Malcolm, with all that I am." They kissed, not hurried, not uncertain. It was the kind of kiss that didn't need to rush because nothing ever would again. Years later, Helena would remember that winter as the one where nothing grand happened, no blizzard, no fire, no sudden change. Just the slow, steady folding of two lives into one. The livery grew busy come spring, and Rachel learned to braid harness leather better than most grown men. She called Malcolm Pa before the summer was out, and he never corrected her. The house behind the stable grew by 2 rooms, one for Rachel and one for a child born 3 winters later, a boy with Malcolm's gray eyes and Helena's quiet focus. They lived like the land did, enduring, growing, rooted deep. And always together. Because some love stories don't arrive with thunder. They come like the snow, soft, certain, and exactly when they're meant to.